Well, the Department of Justice has arrested 2 Chinese Americans for setting up and operating a secret Chinese police station in New York City. This is something that I have been reporting on now for months, the fact that the CCP set up a Chinese police station in the middle of New York. China's foreign ministry is pushing back against this, claiming, quote, China maintains a policy of non-interference in other countries. And these alleged police stations do not exist. The DOJ just arrested 2 people who set them up. Joining me right now is Fox News senior strategic analyst, chairman of the Institute for the Study of War, General Jack Keane. General, it's great to see you this morning. We've talked about these police stations together. What is your take on this arrest?
Well, credit you, Maria, for exposing this months ago, and finally we now got some arrests in it. And certainly it just shows you how sensitive China is to dissent. I mean, we're talking about American citizens here who expose their views about some of the problems in China. They're Chinese Americans, to be sure, and these 2 that are arrested are American citizens who are acting as agents of the Chinese Communist Party to shut down that dissent. And also the fact that they got a troll farm backed up by some 3 dozen other people operating in China to attack these people on social media as well. And they've been named also in these charges, unlikely, obviously, to ever be arrested. But it does reveal sort of an Achilles heel, in my view, of China, Maria, and that is how sensitive they are to adverse opinion and how quickly they respond to it. I mean, look at how elaborate this is. We're many, many oceans away from China, but yet they've got an operation right in New York City to control adverse opinion against their regime. We're not talking about Beijing or Shanghai. We're talking about New York City. And I think as a result of that, our government can do more in terms of our own influence operations against China to expose their repression inside of China, to expose this incident to the people in China, to expose their intimidation and aggression against Taiwan and other countries on a regular basis. I know we do some of this, but I'm talking about something that's more coordinated, more aggressive, and somewhat unrelenting itself. And the reason is China, the fact that they react so strongly to adverse opinion shows you that they're trying to protect themselves because they know their vulnerability, the thing that they fear more than anything are their own people. They fear their own people more than they fear the United States and their adversaries, for sure. And this sort of reveals how much that fear really is.
Perhaps, but my take is that, you know, what took the DOJ so long? I mean, look, we have our own law and order in this country. You're not supposed to have another country, a foreigner, set up a police station on top of our police stations. And I think it's also really worthwhile noting that both of these people who were arrested were U.S. citizens. So that tells you that the CCP does not just send people over here to do the bidding and to do the work that you're talking about, but they also co-opt and corrupt U.S. citizens. And that's another way of infiltrating this country.
There's no doubt about it. China is conducting the most comprehensive penetration of American society in our history. I mean, it overshadows what the Soviet Union was doing during the Cold War. And it is so significant that every few hours, the FBI director indicates he's opening up a new case in the United States of America. So not only is China an adversary of ours against national interests that we have in the Indo-Pacific region and other parts of the world, obviously they recognize the United States as the leading adversary against them, and they want to undermine American society, break down America's trust and faith in its government. And the penetration here is significant. And also, as we well know, to steal as much information as they possibly can, and particularly in terms of technology, to help advance their own adversarial needs to counter the United States and China's adversaries. This is very good what's taken place here. It may have taken too long to finally get it after you exposed it, but the truth is we're finally on top of it, and the American people are getting educated once more against how serious this is. And I'm also encouraged by the fact that over 70% of the American people now, Maria, believe that China is a threat against America's security. And that kind of consensus that's forming is a very good thing.
Yes, and it's important. I'm glad you pointed it out because most people understand the threat certainly much better than they have before. But I don't know that that's going to stop China. I had the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee on Sunday, Michael McCall, and he was talking about what he learned on the ground in Taiwan, saying that Taiwan was not ready. That he has approved lots of weapons that have still not gotten to Taiwan yet. And now he's talking about enabling Taiwan to get eyes and ears on the ground with the Starlink system. He says he's going to push for this ISR. Here's Michael McCall from Sunday. Watch this.
You and I talked about ISR, that's intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance. China has eyes and ears on the ground everywhere in the Pacific region. We have some, but Taiwan has none. And we talked about the idea, like we did in Ukraine, putting up a Starlink satellite system to give Taiwan eyes and ears on the ground to see into China, to see the threat before it comes so they can stop it from invading the island.
General, he said he's going to go to the DOD to try to make that happen. The president of Taiwan wants it. Do you think that would be worthwhile? What about these weapons that Taiwan is waiting for?
Yeah, well, there's so much more that we can do to upgun Taiwan, so to speak. They're not going to be able to, in of themselves, deter China, but they can impose significant cost on China in the event that they're thinking about attacking Taiwan, obviously. And upgunning the 3-year backlog. I spoke to Chairman McCall after he came back from his visit, and he's very much aware of the amount of arms and equipment that that Taiwan has purchased, Maria, out of their own funds, but they haven't been delivered. They're backlogged for 3 years. The Pentagon is putting together a so-called Tiger Team to resolve this. Congress has got to stay on top of this to make certain that this arms and ammunition finally get flowing in there, but also we're doing some training of Taiwan military. I think we can do a lot more training of it. And also we need to develop procedures dealing with China's continuing intimidation and coercion of Taiwan. I don't think the answer is to take a knee. I think the answer is to push back and deal with this intimidation and coercion. It's China who's destabilizing the Taiwan Straits, that the 1979 Taiwan's Relations Act, when we recognized mainland China and continued to acknowledge the existence of Taiwan as a democratic country, we said the mutual interest is to stabilize the area and keep it peaceful and secure. But who's been violating that? That's President Xi. It's his aggression that is doing that. And that's what we need to provide accent to and push back on. But yes, the chairman is absolutely right. Taiwan needs advanced technology to help it defend itself as best it can, and then it needs the United States and our allies to help train them to work together and also to be prepared to defend Taiwan if necessary.
Yeah, and let me just point out that the United States and the entire world gets impacted by anything that happens here because 90% of advanced semiconductor manufacturing is done in Taiwan, and 60% of all global trade moves through that Taiwan Straits. So we're all involved here if, in fact, China goes into Taiwan. General, it's great to get your take, as always. Thank you, sir.